Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Tips for Accurately and Safely Packaging CBD and Cannabis Products in Jars and Bottles. This is Mark Plantier of Enercon Industries, and we thank you for joining us today. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to all registrants as soon as it is posted online, usually within 24 hours. You may ask a question at any time during the presentation by typing it into the question tool provided on your screen. Our panelists will answer questions at the end of the presentation. If there is not time to answer all the questions, our panelists will follow up with you after the webinar. We're very fortunate today to have two experts in the packaging field. Mike Magaro is Director of Sales for Olson Packaging. Olson Packaging has extensive experience in packaging automation equipment and has been a leader in packaging solutions for this market. Mike's expertise includes primary and secondary packaging for both flexible and rigid packaging formats, as well as weighing and filling. Mike is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts Eisenberg School of Management. Jessica Tellner is Regional Sales Manager for Enercon Industries. Enercon is recognized as the global leader in induction cap sealing. Jessie has over 15 years experience in working with companies in the packaging industry throughout North America and internationally. Jessie earned her business degree from St. Norbert's College. Packaging of CBD products, medical, and legalized recreational cannabis is rapidly evolving. And whether you are packaging a few products per minute or dozens per minute, product weight, product freshness, and tamper-evident packaging is critical. Our panelists will be covering these topics in detail and sharing their insights on how to achieve success in these critical packaging areas. And at the end, we'll leave time for your questions and answers. With that, I'll pass it over to Mike, who will talk about the importance of proper weighing.
Thank you, Mark. So this is Mike Magaro with Olson. So what we're going to walk through today is basically the importance of weight and accuracy as it applies to the cannabis packaging space. And when we're talking about weight and accuracy, there's really three key pillars that play into that, and that's regulatory, commercial, and customer experience. From a regulatory standpoint, having the correct weight of product in the finished container, it varies state to state, province to province, depending. But being able to hit the accuracy is critical when it comes to regulatory compliance. From a commercial perspective, with any product, whether it be cannabis or food or anything, giving away or overfilling, giving away, or underfilling has a key effect on your bottom line. So being able to accurately weigh out product drops right to your bottom line because you're not giving away product that you otherwise would have been able to put into another package. And then from a customer experience perspective, having consistent weights creates a consistent product presentation within a container. So customers know that when they open up their bottle, their jar, their pouch of product, they know what they're going to get within it. So being able to accurately weigh out products, specifically cannabis flower, is key to hit those three pillars. When we started in the cannabis industry, we had 50 years of experience packaging all different types of products, whether it be food or nutraceuticals, etc. When it came to cannabis, we realized something right away, and this was around 2013 when we started in the industry. We realized that when you're packaging a product that typically comes in 1 gram, 3.5 gram, 7 gram increments for retail packages, that the accuracy was extremely critical. Because if you're doing 1 gram of product, if you give away more than 1/100th of a gram, you're really giving away a significant amount of product from an accuracy standpoint. So what we did was we designed a cannabis-specific check weighing system to basically double check the weighment before it goes into the package, allowing us to get accuracies down to 1/100th of a gram. We align that with the speed of the system to be able to achieve up to 35 containers per minute, depending on the container format, where we're able to increase output and hit those accuracy targets. If you look at automating as compared to manual packaging, typically your accuracies are good because you have a human who is weighing it out on a benchtop scale and then placing it into a container. The challenge is A, human error, right? Humans can make errors, and speed, where we typically estimate that one person is capable of accurately weighing and filling somewhere between 1 and 3 containers per minute. So if you're trying to achieve 30 containers per minute with an average of 1 per minute, you have to have a substantial investment in labor to be able to achieve that. So when you align the accurate filling and the speed with an Olson system or an automated system in general, the ROI typically it occurs in a matter of months if you account for the labor savings, product giveaway, and the increase in output speed. When we look at the cannabis industry as a whole, we break it down into flower and edibles, which we have experience filling both. And then we look at 2 different aspects when it comes to weighing and filling of those products. So for flower, what we're typically seeing right now in the industry is flowers going into rigid containers, PET, glass, jars, bottles, etc. Sometimes you'll see flower in flexible packaging like stand-up pouches, but jars and bottles lend themselves better, I think, to flower because it protects the product from damage. But typically, from a weighment perspective, we usually see 1 gram, 3.5, and 7 grams going into these containers. Occasionally, we'll get a request for an ounce package at 28 grams, and the system's capable of doing that. It's just determining the size of the container that it needs to go into. Usually, when we look at containers and output, we look at how many pounds per day you're looking to achieve from a packaging perspective, and what those individual weighments would be. So for an estimate on this slide, you can see if you're doing 1 gram jars or 1 gram packages, typically an ROI will be apparent if you're producing 25 pounds of product per day, as well as if you're doing 3.5 grams, an ROI will be apparent at 85 pounds per day. Again, it's subjective, but when you look at it that way, you can kind of determine where you need to be from an automation standpoint. And when you're looking at weighing and filling flower specifically, maximizing efficiency is critical. So pre-sorting of buds is critical to any process due to the non-uniformity of the product. But if the buds are pre-sorted, if the bottle diameters are specified so the flower can flow freely into the package, you can ultimately maximize the efficiency of the system and have that thing cooking. So those are key to maximizing for flower. And then the other piece to the puzzle is once you look at the weighing and filling piece, there's other secondary equipment, including capping, labeling, and of course induction sealing, that play into the overall efficiency of the line and increased output, increased speed, and increased accuracy of the overall packaging operation. And then when we look at edibles and gummies, typically what we're seeing now, over the past 7 years, the majority of our installations were in flower. But over the past, I would say 18 months, the majority of the RFQs and installations have been requests for edible lines. We're seeing edibles, or we're envisioning edibles outpacing flower from a CAGR standpoint. And then from a packaging standpoint, we're seeing edibles going into bottles and jars, but also there is a push on the flexible side where you're seeing 10 counts and 20 counts going into pouches with child-resistant closures. From an ROI perspective, when we align containers and output on edibles, we're usually seeing 10 counts and 20 counts. Sometimes we'll get the request for 30 counts, 40 counts, but those seem to be the counts that make the most sense in the space. And if we look at it from an output standpoint, if you're producing 90,000 gummies per day at 10 counts, there will be an apparent ROI, and 180,000 gummies per day for 20 counts. And again, with edibles and flower, every edible is different, right? If we focus on gummies, which seem to be the most prevalent in the space right now, gummies can come in many different shapes and sizes. They can be oil coated, starch coated. They flow differently, right? So understanding how the product flows is very important. What Olson has done is aligned our experience in the gummy nutraceutical space in order to manage the product through the system.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jessica with Enercon. I'm going to discuss how induction sealing plays an important role in the packaging aspect of the cannabis industry, focusing on safety and freshness. The first important aspect I want to discuss is tamper evidence. An induction seal provides a hermetic seal, something that another type of liner like a pressure-sensitive liner cannot provide. Tamper evidence has become a very critical issue in today's world. All consumers want to take the cap off of their bottle of any product, including cannabis, and be able to instantly see that the bottle has been sealed for their protection. It's become the norm, and it's become something consumers expect to see under a cap. The second aspect I want to touch on is product freshness. Again, a hermetic seal, which an induction seal provides, seals the bottle off from things such as humidity and keeps the product as fresh as the day it was packaged until the consumer removes the liner. This ensures that an expensive product like cannabis is going to be in top condition for the consumer's use. Now we're going to look at a few of the basics of induction sealing and how it works. You can see in the photo on the slide, the layers are in place when it goes, the layers that are in place when it goes through an induction sealer. Generally, you're going to source the cap with the liner already inside of the cap so that when it gets put onto the bottle, it places the liner into the proper place so that it's ready to be sealed. There are three main principles in induction sealing to make sure it works properly, and it's pressure, heat, and time. The pressure is provided by the cap, which is why the cap application torque is so important. Insufficient cap torque is one of the biggest application issues we see in the field. This slide shows our recommended cap application torque range, which should be about half of the cap size in inch-pounds. The heat aspect is coming from the output power of the machine. And this is what we call your sealing window. This is going to be a balance of the output power and also the time, which is the third main principle of induction sealing. And the time is coming from the conveyor speed. And you see we reference conveyor speed rather than a bottle per minute speed. And the reason that we talk more in a conveyor speed is because the machine cares more about dwell time of each bottle rather than how many bottles go through it in a given amount of time.
So now we'll switch gears and we'll go back to Mike and talk about equipment configuration and some thoughts about scaling your operations.
Thank you, Mark. So from the equipment configuration standpoint, there's a number of different ways to configure a cannabis filling line. The way we've approached it is a modular approach. If you can advance the slide. So the heart of the system is the scale, the combination weigher, and the cannabis specific check weigher that I mentioned on the previous or at the beginning of the presentation. The scale is what's taking bulk product and breaking it out into individual increments of 1 gram, 3.5 grams, 7 grams, weighing it, making sure it's accurate, and then dropping it into the container. A lot of our customers or existing customers start their journey into the automation world with the scale and check weigher, where they use a semi-automatic system for weighing the product. Basically, they take a jar, put it under a chute, step on a foot switch, the scale weighs out the product and drops it in. And that's typically what we view as the first step. The other pieces of the puzzle can be added after or at the same time, allowing basically the whole system to grow with the customer. You can advance that. So the way we look at it is phase one semi-automatic, and this is kind of what I described. The heart of the system is part of that phase, which is the scale, where you're not eliminating all of the labor from the line. You're typically going to have 2 to 3 operators, 2 to 2.5 we usually estimate running this line, but you're going to be able to achieve speeds dependent upon the system up to around 30 containers per minute on the system, and then you align that with the accuracy. So from an initial investment standpoint, phase one makes a lot of sense to really start the process. In phase two, we call it improving efficiency. So you already have the heart of the system, the scale that's weighing out the product, But now you can add things like vertical bucket elevator and a supply hopper, which help assist with the product loading. Instead of depositing the bulk product into the actual scale, which is typically elevated, you can load the product at floor level, and the elevator will bring the product to the top of the scale. And phase 3 we call automating the primary packaging. So this is where you pull out the operators who are physically putting the container underneath the scale in order to fill their container, and you're adding primary packaging equipment. For rigid containers like bottles and jars, we typically use an indexing conveyor, which basically feeds the bottles underneath the scale automatically. Scale fills the bottles, and then the bottle goes on to its secondary phase, which would be labeling, capping, induction sealing. For flexible packaging, we typically use a pre-made pouch machine if flour or edibles are required to go into that type of packaging format, which basically just plugs in underneath the scale. Scale feeds the pouch machine opens the pouch, product deposits in, pouch is sealed, and then the pouch is sent on its way. So there's a number of different primary packaging pieces of equipment depending on the package format required, but it can be added at the point where you need to pull more labor out of your process and increase the level of automation. The phase 4 is what we look at is once you've now automated your filling process completely. So you have the scale, you have an indexing conveyor for your jars or your bottles. Now it's time to step it up another notch and add automatic labeling, capping, and induction sealing. Again, all of these things can be invested in at the onset of a project, but the way we've designed the systems is that they can be added after the fact, right? You already have the heart of the system, which is the scale. You now have the indexing conveyor, you're automating your packaging process, and now it's time to look at automating the rest of the process, which is the capping, the labeling, the induction sealing, etc. And this slide gives you a good visual representation of the different phases of the process. If this is the route you want to take, it really lines out the journey of automation if you're transitioning from manually packaging right now and looking towards fully automating in the future. Phase 1 is highlighted in red. That's the heart of the system. That's the scale and the checkware. Phase 2 is highlighted in green. That's now you're making it a little more ergonomically friendly, loading at floor level. Phase 3 is your automation process. In this image, we have an indexing conveyor placed there, but again, that could be a pouch machine or a bagger, depending on the package format. And then phase 4 is your secondary equipment, your labeling, your capping, your induction sealing. So it's important to look at this as you can look at it as a whole, which is a complete system from weighing, filling all the way through induction sealing, or it can be added as you grow.
All right, thanks, Mike. This is Jessica again with Enercon. I'm going to go through some of our equipment options in terms of our induction sealers. I'm going to start on the bottom right. That is our handheld Super Seal Junior machine. So it's fully manual. We have a lot of these that have been sold into the cannabis industry over the last couple of years, with there being a lot of manually packaging, manual operations. This machine is very flexible in terms of cap size. You can seal caps that are anywhere from about 20 millimeters all the way up to 120 millimeters on our large sealing head, and everywhere in between. In terms of seal time, it's also quite quick. Generally takes about a half a second to seal. So can do quite a few in a day's time. And it's also a great backup. Once customers decide they want to go inline, it's a really handy machine to have around. Then on the bottom left, that's our Super Seal. That machine we like to call the workhorse of the induction sealing industry. It's probably the most popular induction sealer in the entire world. There are literally thousands of Super Seals in the industry. This machine is a little bit more basic when compared to some of our other inline options, but it's very sturdy. very consistent, and certainly going to do a good job from a sealing perspective. The top right is our Super Seal Touch. I would say in terms of specific to cannabis, this is by far the most popular machine we've sold into the cannabis industry. Reason being, it does allow to fully integrate into a fully automated line. We also offer what we call a cap inspection system with this machine. And what that includes is the ability to look for missing foils in your caps, look at the cap as it enters, whether it's crooked or high on the bottle. And this also includes what we call a stalled bottle detection. And that's going to turn the machine off anytime it detects that a bottle has entered but doesn't exit when it's supposed to. So it will turn the machine off to prevent that liner from continuing to heat up while it sits under there. And then on the top left, you're going to see our Super Seal Max. Going to have the same capabilities as the Super Seal Touch, just double the power. So this is a machine that we utilize when line speeds reach probably 150 feet per minute or more, and depending on the cap configuration. Sometimes a little bit lower line speed than that, but like I said, same capabilities, just double the power, double the dwell time with the two sealing heads. So we have multiple options in terms of sealing heads that fit onto our machines. And for the most part, all of these sealing heads are interchangeable. So when you buy a machine with one particular sealing head, you're not necessarily committing yourself to only using that head long term. If you need to seal something different 5 years from now, you can buy an additional sealing head that works on the machine. It takes about 5 minutes to swap them out. We have tunnel style sealing heads, we have flat style sealing heads, and on the lower right you'll see one version of our what we call our universal all-in-one style sealing head that allows the flexibility to seal from 24 millimeters up to 120 millimeters with just the one sealing head. And this is a close-up picture of our universal style all-in-one head that we offer with our Super Seal Touch. And you can see the images on the front of the sealing head are going to show you where you need to move the small knob on the front for the different cap sizes. All of the changing happens inside of the head. So it's a very, very quick and simple change. If you're running a 38 millimeter one day, you need to run an 89 millimeter the next day. Literally going to take you seconds to make that change on the sealing head.
All right, thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Mike. Before we get to our audience's questions, and again, you can use the question tool to submit those to our panel of experts. Quick review of some of the key takeaways from today's presentation. Product weight is a legal, safety, and a business issue. Achieving 1/100th gram weighing accuracy is possible. The importance of considering scalability for your packaging operations. We learned how an induction seal preserves freshness and can provide tamper evidence. And we talked about the keys to induction sealing, which are the combination of heat, pressure, and time. With that, we will go to the questions. And the first one, Mike, is a question for you. If you're looking at a full phase 4 operation, how much space is needed from one end of the line to the end?
Great question. So there's a number of creative ways to modify a layout in order to make it fit a room. What we specialize at Olson is getting creative and how to lay those systems out. So typically, I think you're around 40 feet if you are directly in one straight line, maybe give or take depending on the equipment picked out from a capping and labeling standpoint. But again, there's a lot of flexibility there where we can do U-turns and 90-degree turns in order to make it fit the space. So long story short is you provide us with how much space we have to work with, and we can tell you if it will fit or how we can make it fit.
All right, thanks, Mike. I've got a question for you, Jesse. Could you talk more about the differences between a pressure-sensitive liner versus an induction seal, talking both about barrier and also tamper evidence?
Sure. So a pressure-sensitive liner is primarily put in the cap to help with the fit of the cap. It's not going to do much for you in terms of, leak prevention. Definitely not tamper evidence, because it's it's going to grab onto the bottle a bit, but I know every time I take a cap off of anything that has a pressure sensitive liner in it, it's generally starting to come off the bottle when you take the cap off. So it's not grabbing onto the bottle fully. So with an induction seal, with it providing a hermetic seal, you're not going to ever have a situation where you take the cap off and that liner is starting to come off already with it. And from a tamper evidence perspective, you're generally going to see a liner that we call a weld bond style liner, that by law you have to penetrate through the center of the liner and then peel off. And like I said, that's part of a law that's going to allow that liner to stay on the perimeter of the bottle from a tamper evidence perspective. And in terms of barrier, that would be something that we can refer you to liner manufacturers in terms of making sure they spec the proper liner for your application, to make sure the liner is compatible to not only your product, but also your bottle.
All right, thanks, Jesse. Mike, we've got another question for you. How does temperature affect the integrity of an edible product?
So temperature, if we're talking about gummy edibles, temperature can play a critical role in depending on the makeup of the gummy. So what we've seen, not really in cannabis, but in gummy nutraceuticals, if we're talking about a starch or a powder coated gummy that tends to be sticky without a powder on it, in ambient temperature, it usually goes fine. But then if it's a non-temperature controlled facility in the summer months, some of the product will stick together more. So typically, if you're regular ambient temperature for gummy-like products, they're going to move the same, or they'll move consistently through the system. But there are outliers there. So usually what we ask is that we look at the product prior to proposing a full system and make sure it acts as consistently as possible.
Thanks, Mike. Jesse, we have a question here relative to scalability. If someone starts with the handheld induction sealer, are they able to upgrade it into a inline production system?
The Super Seal Junior machine is fully manual, so it's not something that we can't alter that machine specifically to turn it into an inline machine. We do certainly offer trade-in discounts and incentives to upgrade from that perspective. If they decide they want to start sealing inline, so that's certainly a possibility. Just depends on the age of the equipment and all of that type of thing. But if there's somebody who has a Super Seal Junior right now and is interested in moving in line, just give one of us at Enercon a call and we can certainly discuss.
All right, I'd like to remind our audience today that you will receive a copy of this presentation and a link that will allow you to access the video presentation as well. You can also reach out directly to Mike and Jesse with their contact information there. Looks like we don't have any additional questions. So with that, we will conclude today's webinar. We appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on our next topic. Thank you.